Hey, what's up friends? Baldwin here from the Speaker Lab. Today we're going to be doing a video breakdown of Alex Honnold's TED Talk, all about how he climbed a 3,000 foot vertical mountain without a rope. It's completely insane. The talk is amazing. He did a phenomenal job. But what we're going to do, this is a reaction video, so we're going to take the breakdown of he did of his climb. We're going to break that talk down and show you how you can become a better speaker for your next presentation. Now, this is completely reactionary. We have not seen this video at all. So if you like this, make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you like, make sure that you comment below so you don't miss out on any of these videos. All right, let's get right to it. Check out this video from Alex. All right, Alex, let's see what we got here. Climbing 3,000 feet, that is no joke.
Hello, I'd like to show you guys 30 seconds of the best day of my life.
Okay, so one thing that I noticed right out of the gate here is I kind of like the idea of coming in with an opening line and then just allowing, going right into a video or some type of slide or something like that. But one of the things that he could do a little bit differently here is he said, I want to show you one of the best days of my life, right? But the way he says it, I'm not really believing it. Are you buying it? I'm not buying what he's selling right now. So one thing that he could do is if you're gonna say, what if, you know, I wanna show you a moment from the best day of my life, like you should feel that. Now, one of the things that it's important to remember as a speaker is that your level of energy and excitement needs to match that of the audience, meaning that if you're speaking to a massive audience of thousands of people, then you have to be more excited, you have to be more up, versus if you're speaking to a small group, let's say you're speaking to a group of 20 people and you have that same level of energy, it just comes across weird and kind of hokey. So what you want to make sure that you do is, again, make sure that you match your energy level to the audience and make sure that the energy level also matches what it is that you're saying. Okay, now clearly he's climbing without a rope. That's insane. Like why would a human do this? I don't know. I'm scared of heights, so this is a little intense right now. That's crazy. You can almost kind of hear the audience react there, just like, oh, he made it, he's alive, he's here on stage. That's good. Now this is, again, I like this opening of showing just a quick clip there. Now one thing he could do there is instead of just having that one continuous shot, he could have a couple of different shots there that he'd be pulling from, just to kind of give it some variety there. But I like the way that he's setting this up, because again, it kind of shows the audience of like, hey, this is what we're gonna be talking about, but let me show you a visual of how insane this actually is.
So that was El Capitan in California's Yosemite National Park. And in case you couldn't tell, I was climbing by myself without a rope, a style of climbing known as free soloing. That was the culmination.
Now that's also an opportunity to make some type of joke there, because oftentimes we, like as an audience, we all realize, like we just watched this thing and we realize this is absolutely insane. There's no way that like a normal, sane human being would do this. And so he could say, you know, this is me climbing up this without a rope, of what's called free soloing, which is also known as dumb. Something like that that just allows the audience to like break the tension of like, holy crap, what we just saw is totally insane.
A nearly decade-long dream. And in the video, I'm over 2,500 feet off the ground. Seems scary? Yeah, it is. Which is why I spent so many years dreaming about soloing El Cap and not actually doing it. But on the day that...
Okay, now one of the things that you notice there is he made a little joke of, I spent so much time dreaming about it than actually doing it. Everyone kind of laughed, knowing like, yeah, because it's crazy to actually do it. One of the things that he did is there was a little bit of laughter, and then he continued to go very, very quickly. So anytime you have any type of laughter with an audience, it's good to just stop and let that kind of sit there for a second. You don't want to like continue on, because if you go too fast, then one thing that happens is you kill the energy, you kill the momentum of the laugh that just happened. But two, if people are still laughing and interacting with what you just said and you start going, they're not going to pick up and not going to hear what the next thing is that you just said there. Now, as a total side note here, one of the things that I noticed that I really, really like is the setup of the crowd right now. You can see that everyone is really tightly compacted there. There's not a lot of empty seats. There may not be any empty seats, which from a speaker's perspective, that's exactly what you want. What you really want is a room that's too small for the number of people that is actually there, because crowds create energy. What you don't want is you don't want a room that's, let's say, seats 1,000 people and you have 100 people in there. Then it feels completely empty. It feels completely dead. I remember speaking at a convention a couple of years ago, and I got there and there were just chairs all over this room, completely packed to the rafters there. And so the event planner came up to me and said, hey, I apologize, we have way too many seats here. We're not even sure if the fire marshal's gonna let us be here. And from a speaker's perspective, I'm like, this is awesome. This is exactly what you want, because you want, again, that energy that's contagious. You want it to be there with other people. So one other thing to remember is, let's say that you go to a room and let's say it seats 500, but you only have 50 people in there. One of the things that you want to do is you want to make the room feel as small and compact as possible. So the way that you do that is you want people to sit as close to the front and as close to the middle as possible. You don't want, if there's 500 seats, you don't want to allow people to sit all over the place. You want it to be as close and tight as possible. So no matter what the room setup is, it's your responsibility as a speaker to make it fit, make sure that you are set up for the best possible talk that you can give.
That video was taken, it didn't feel scary at all. It felt as comfortable and as natural as a walk in the park, which is what most folks were doing in Yosemite that day. Today I'd like to talk about
Okay, so again, another opportunity there to just let some laughter kind of hang there for a second. I'm climbing up without a rope. The rest of the people are walking down, and we're doing the same thing. Well, clearly it's not the same thing, so again, it's a good opportunity to just let some of that humor sit for a second.
I was able to feel so comfortable and how I overcame my fear. I'll start with a very brief version of how I became a climber, and then tell the story of my two most significant free solos. They were both successful, which is why I'm here. But the first...
There you go. See how you just let that sit for a second, because if he started to go on, but if you just sit for a second, then again, it gives the audience a chance to respond and to react to you.
The first felt like...
Another thing that he did that was really smart is he kind of set up the intro of, okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of my fears. I'm going to tell you about how I got started as a climber. I'm going to tell you about some of the crazy climbs that I've done. So he's kind of setting up this introduction of, here's the roadmap we're going to go down for the next couple minutes with this talk.
Unsatisfying, whereas the second, El Cap, was by far the most fulfilling day of my life. Through these two climbs, you'll see my process for managing fear. So I started climbing in a gym when I was around 10 years old, which means that my life has been centered.
Okay, one of the things that I noticed in terms of what he's doing with his body is his feet are very planted, okay, which is okay. That's a good thing that you can do. But notice what he's doing. He's not really making eye contact with anybody. He's just kind of scanning the crowd, almost like a robot, just going, you know, like an oscillating fan. He's just kind of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so it starts to feel a little bit robotic there versus talking to this person over here and making eye contact with someone here and talking with someone down front here. But when you're just kind of going back and forth, you're not really making eye contact or engaging or interacting with anybody. You're just kind of, you're that oscillating fan there. So again, nothing wrong with being planted, but oftentimes it's good to just pick a couple of people out that you can make eye contact with in the audience.
Climbing for more than 20 years. After nearly a decade of climbing mostly indoors, I made the transition to the outdoors and gradually started free soloing. I built up my comfort over time and slowly took on bigger and more challenging walls. And there have been many free soloists before me, so I had plenty of inspiration to draw from. But by 2008, I'd repeated most of their previous solos in Yosemite, and was starting to imagine breaking into new terrain. The obvious first choice was Half Dome, an iconic 2,000-foot wall that lords over the east end of the valley. The problem, though also the allure, was that it was too big.
Now, I'm someone that I like to use a lot of humor whenever I speak. So whenever he's talking about this and he says the obvious first choice is Half Dome. Now, most of us don't know what Half Dome is. I'm not a climber. I don't know what Half Dome is. But I think, again, it's an opportunity for him to use some type of humor there to say, the obvious first choice is Half Dome. You guys all knew that, right? Which clearly the audience is probably not going to know that. But when you show the picture, again, it's a chance to say, the obvious choice is to climb something like this, Half Dome, right?
I didn't really know how to prepare for potential free solo. So I decided to skip the preparations and just go up there and have an adventure. I figured I would rise to the...
That's a good line, right? So rather than preparing for Half Dome, rather than preparing for climbing 2,500 or 3,000 feet without a rope, I just decided to just kind of wing it, right? It's a good line to, again, kind of break some of the tension with the audience.
Which, unsurprisingly, was not the best strategy. I did at least climb the route roped up with a friend 2 days before, just to make sure that I knew roughly where to go and that I could physically do it. But when I came back by myself 2 days later, I decided that I didn't want to go that way. I knew that there was a 300-foot variation that circled around one of the hardest parts of the climb. I suddenly decided to skip the hard part and take the variation, even though...
Okay, now let's talk about slides for a second. Slides can be really, really hit and miss, depending on how you use them. They can be really, really effective if you're sharing some type of story, or showing an image is really effective and powerful to make the point that oftentimes if he was just describing, I climbed really, really high without a rope, most of us are like, I can kind of visualize that, but I don't entirely wrap my mind around what exactly that looks like or what that means. But by showing a picture of it, like that picture right there, hanging on one-handed way up in the air with no rope, really is a powerful, powerful picture. And this is a chance for him to, again, put the picture up. He didn't have to reference it. Hey guys, do you see there how I'm in the red hoodie and I don't have any jacket or I don't have any rope or anything like that, and I just have one hand? That's pretty crazy, right? He didn't have to say anything. Just putting the picture up lets that moment just kind of sit there like, dang, this, like what this guy did is legit.
I've never climbed it before, but I immediately began to doubt myself. Imagine being by yourself in the dead center of a 2,000-foot face, wondering if you're lost. Thankfully, it was pretty much the right way, and I circled back to the route. I was slightly rattled. I was pretty rattled, but I tried not to let it bother me too much, because I knew that all the...
He's starting to relax a little bit more. Did you notice he was a little tense early on, and he's kind of just following the script in his head, but there's been a couple moments where he's kind of broke a character, so to speak, and he seems a little bit more relaxed with an audience. And what an audience wants is they don't want someone who's just going to regurgitate a script, right? We don't want that. We want like a human being that's talking to a collection of other human beings. So we want a human that's going to act like a human and engage with us. So, you know, this is probably maybe one of the only talks that he's done, and maybe one of the biggest talks that he's done. And so I don't think that he's doing this all the time by any means, but it seems like he's getting a little bit more comfortable as he goes here in terms of his engagement level with the audience.
Climbing was up the top. I needed to stay composed. It was a beautiful September morning, and as I climbed higher, I could hear the sounds of tourists chatting and laughing on the summit.
Again, this is a really good shot. This is also a good example of, from a speaker's perspective, whenever you are speaking at an event that has a good setup like this, anytime that you can get pictures from behind the speaker, behind you, looking out at the audience, it's a really, really powerful shot of just showing the size of the audience, and it's really, really good for just, again, that example that like you've done this before.
They'd all hiked up the normal trail on the back, which I was planning on using for my descent. But between me and the summit lay a blank slab of granite. There were no cracks or edges to hold on to, just small ripples of texture up a slightly less than vertical wall. I had to trust my life to the friction between my climbing shoes and the smooth granite. I carefully balanced my way upward, shifting my weight back and forth.
Okay. So notice here again, like we were talking about, that your actions need to match that of the size of the audience or the size of the room. So in this case, he's talking about how he's climbing and his arms are really tightly, and he's kind of in this little square where he's trying to stay within. But remember, the bigger the room, the bigger you have to be. So if you're in a room with let's say 1,000 people or 1,000 seats, someone at the back of the room, this is going to look really, really tiny. It's not even going to look like you're really even moving your hands. Versus on the front row, you may feel like you're like the speaker's being huge, right? So again, think about from a perspective of the person in the back row. This is one thing I always try to do before a speaking engagement, is I try to go in the room and just sit there and sit in different sections to see what are the sight lines. If someone's sitting in the back, what does the person on stage look like? How big or small? Can I understand what they're saying? Can I see their reactions? So try a couple different spots there just to try the room out before you actually get up and speak.
Small smears. But then I reached a foothold that I didn't quite trust. 2 days ago, I had just stepped right up on it, but that had been with a rope on. Now it felt too small and too slippery. I doubted that my foot would stay on if I weighted it. I considered a foot further to the side, but it seemed worse. I switched my feet and tried a foot further out. It seemed even worse. I started to panic. I could hear people laughing on the summit just above me. I wanted to be anywhere but on that slab. My mind was racing.
Okay, now this is a good opportunity to pause and to slow down, because he's talking about how he's halfway up or at some point up the cliff there, and he starts to panic. And we're all kind of wondering yeah, that seems like a normal human reaction, but how do you deal with that? What do you do? And so if he's just kind of going at the same cadence all the way through it, it kind of loses a little bit of the effectiveness. But if he slows down and says, I was halfway up, I moved my foot over here, and it didn't feel like it was solid. And then I moved my foot over here, and that felt even worse. And I could hear people laughing above, and at that moment I wanted to be anywhere but there on that cliff. like that moment, all of a sudden when he starts slowing down, pausing a little bit, it starts to feel a little bit heavier. It starts to feel like you start to lean into the emotion of it from an audience perspective, just like, wow, this is for real. This guy is doing this and he's up there and he's panicking. Like I'm wondering like I'm legit wondering how's this gonna play out?
In every direction. I knew what I had to do, but I was just too afraid to do it. I just had to stand up on my right foot. And so after what felt like an eternity, I accepted what I had to do and I stood up on the right foot. And it didn't slip, and so I didn't die. And that move marked the end of the hardest climbing. And so I charged from there towards the summit.
Okay, now this is also another opportunity where I assume most of the audience is not climbers. They are having a hard time kind of visualizing this. He showed a picture there. He didn't really go into it too much, which is okay. But one thing he could do right here is you could have like a chair or a ladder or a stool or something to show kind of an example of this is what it would be like, right? And that might help people to wrap their minds around it a little bit more. Oftentimes too is if you're using some type of prop, let's say if he walked out there and he starts speaking, but there's a ladder on stage, right? And he's not referencing it, he's not pointing out, he's not saying, I'm gonna get to that later, right? But it's just kind of there. It creates intrigue and curiosity in the mind of an audience because they're kind of wondering, what's that ladder there for? What's he gonna do with that ladder? Is that ladder here? Is that supposed to be there? So it keeps an audience engaged, wondering where like that prop or that ladder is going to come into play. Another idea is if you had a table with some type of item on it and you have it under some type of blanket or some type of cloth or something like that. So just kind of people are wondering like, does he got something there? When's that come out? What is that? It just keeps people's curiosity up.
And so normally when you summit Half Dome, you have a rope and a bunch of climbing gear on you, and tourists gasp and they flock around you for photos. This time I popped over the edge shirtless, panting, jacked. I was amped, but nobody batted an eye.
Good, just pause.
I looked like a lost hiker that was too close to the edge. I was surrounded by people talking on cell phones and having picnics. I felt like I was in a mall. I took off my tight climbing shoes.
So that, again, there's a good pause there. Let the laughter finish and then continue.
Hiking back down. And that's when people stopped me. You're hiking barefoot? That's so hardcore. I didn't bother to explain, but
really good line.
That night in my climbing journal, I duly noted my free solo of Half Dome, but I included a frowny face and a comment, "Do better?" ? I'd succeeded in the solo, and it was celebrated as a big first in climbing. Some friends later...
What would be cool there, so he said, I finished Half Dome, and then I wrote in my journal, "Do better?" ? What would be really cool is if he's using slides, is to show a picture of the journal, right? Again, it's one thing for him to say it, it's another thing to show a picture of this is what I actually wrote. I finished this thing that maybe nobody in human history has done before, and then I wrote, "Do better?" ? And this is also an opportunity to bring it back to the audience. And maybe he's going to do that here in a minute, but connecting the dots for the audience is saying, listen, maybe you're not going to be climbing Half Dome or El Capitan at some point, but maybe your thing you've accomplished that you feel like is a really big deal. And it is, let's celebrate that. But at the same time, could you do better? Is there some other area of your life that you feel like you're holding back on that you could be doing better? So an opportunity there to transition to make it more about the audience at that point.
I film about it, but I was unsatisfied. I was disappointed in my performance because I knew that I'd gotten away with something. I didn't want to be a lucky climber. I wanted to be a great climber.
That's a great line right there. Okay, that's good for, again, not just for a climber, but for like human beings. I didn't want to be a lucky climber. I wanted to be a great climber. That's a line that like, that's the type of thing people are writing down. That's the type of thing people are going to tweet out. That's the type of thing that people are going to talk about. I didn't want to be a lucky climber. I wanted to be a great climber. I don't want to be a lucky dad. I want to be a great dad. I don't want to be a lucky husband. I want to be a great husband. So think about what that means for you. Again, another opportunity to take what he's talking about and bring it back to the audience.
The next year or so off from free soloing because I knew that I shouldn't make a habit of relying on luck. But even though I wasn't soloing very much, I'd already started to think about El Cap. It was always in the back of my mind as the obvious crown jewel of solos. It's the most striking wall in the world.
Okay, so it's one thing to show this, right? It's something totally different to for people to understand the size and magnitude of this. Like he's gonna say this is 3,000 feet or whatever it may be, but most of us still have a hard time wrapping our mind around like 3,000 feet. I mean, that's just kind of a big arbitrary number. But if he was able to demonstrate, if you took everybody in this room and you stacked them on top of each other, that would be about 3,000 feet. Or if you took the Empire State Building and stacked it upon itself, 2 or 3 times or whatever, it would be about, just something so people kind of get a little better sense of like, that's big, but I see trees there, but I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around like how big is that actually?
Each year for the next 7 years, I'd think, this is the year that I'm going to solo El Cap. And then I would drive in Yosemite, look up at the wall, and think, no freaking way. It was...
Good line.
It's too big and too scary. But eventually I came to accept that I wanted to test myself against El Cap. It represented true mastery. But I needed it to feel different. I didn't want to get away with anything or barely squeak by. This time I wanted to do it right. The thing that makes El Cap so intimidating is the sheer scale of the wall. Most climbers take 3 to 5 days to ascend the 3,000 feet of vertical granite. The idea of setting out up a wall of that size with nothing but shoes and a chalk bag seemed impossible.
Wow.
3,000 feet of climbing represents thousands of distinct hand and foot movements, which is a lot to remember. Many of the moves I knew through sheer repetition. I'd climbed El Cap maybe 50 times over the previous decade with a rope. But this photo shows my preferred method of rehearsing the moves. I'm on the summit, about to rappel down the face with over 1,000 feet of rope.
This is also a good example of showing how much rope he has. If he brought that much rope out, that might give people a little bit of a sense of this is how much, you know, I think he said he had over 1,000 feet of rope. So if he had 3,000 feet of rope, so 3 times that, and he brought that out on stage, again, it becomes really powerful visual of how, like the scale and the magnitude of what it is that he's about to do. A good example of this is that there was a few years ago that I believe it was Jamie Oliver who did a TED Talk, and he was talking, I think it was about sugar and how much sugar I think maybe the average human or child consumes in a, I don't remember, a lifetime or a year or something like that. And it's some significant amount of, you know, 50 pounds or something like that. So again, it's one thing for someone to say, you know, this is what several pounds of sugar is. Something else for him to bring it out. So if I remember right, he brought it out in an actual wheelbarrow and dumped it out on stage so people could visually wrap their mind around, like, this is what this much sugar actually looks like, right? And then it becomes a much more concrete for people at that point.
Spend the day practicing by myself. Once I found sequences that felt secure and repeatable, I had to memorize them. I had to make sure that they were so deeply ingrained within me that there was no possibility of error. I didn't want to be up on the wall wondering if I was going the right way or using the best holds. I needed everything to feel automatic. Climbing with a rope is a largely physical effort. You just have to be strong enough to hold on and make the movements upward. But free soloing plays out more in the mind. The physical effort is largely the same. Your body is still climbing the same wall. But staying calm and performing at your best when you know that any mistake could mean death requires a certain kind of mindset. That's not supposed to be funny, but it is.
Okay, so good moment there where you can tell he kind of went off script of like, this wasn't supposed to be funny, but it's true. Like, any slip up could cost my life. And so it's a good opportunity for him to kind of break out of the script there and just be a human. The more he kind of acknowledges like, yeah, no, this thing I just did, this is kind of crazy, wasn't it, guys? The more I think he continues to build some of that rapport and connection with the audience.
I work to cultivate that mindset through visualization, which basically just means imagining the entire experience of soloing the wall. Partially that was to help me remember all the holds, but mostly visualization was about feeling the texture of each hold in my hand and imagining the sensation of my leg reaching out and placing my foot just so. I'd imagine it all like a choreographed dance thousands of feet up. The most difficult part of the whole route was called the boulder problem. It was about 2,000 feet off the ground and consisted of the hardest physical moves on the whole route. Long pulls between poor handholds with very small, slippery feet. This is what I mean by a poor handhold. An edge smaller than the width of a pencil.
Okay, great visual here, right? Because it's one thing for him to describe, like, I got to this part, guys, and it was really, really hard, right? It's another thing when you show that and you're like, there's nothing to grip onto, right? Even with some chalk on your hands, there's nothing to, how is this guy still alive? It's crazy.
But facing downward that I had to press up into with my thumb. But that wasn't even the hardest part. The crux culminated in a karate kick with my left foot over to the inside of an adjacent corner, a maneuver that required a high degree of precision and flexibility. Enough so that I'd been doing a nightly stretching routine for a full year ahead of time to make sure that I could comfortably make the reach with my leg.
All right, so something there that he, again, can kind of like pause and let that sink in. I was planning this climb up 3,000 foot of El Capitan, and there was one section of it, one little small section of it, that I trained for a year just to do this one section. Not for the whole, but for this one section. Like, just something like that to let that, again, sink in with the audience. Like, that's crazy.
Practice the moves, my visualization turned to the emotional component of a potential solo. Basically, what if I got up there and it was too scary? What if I was too tired? What if I couldn't quite make the kick?
Okay, this is a good example of where he's beginning to enter the mind of the conversation that the audience is probably already having. Okay, an audience that's watching this, I know I'm thinking right now, and you may be thinking the same thing, like, what if he gets tired? What if he doesn't think he can do it? What if he panics? What if he has to go to the bathroom? Like, what do you do in all of these different situations or circumstances? So him entering the conversation that's happening already in the mind of the audience is a really, really smart speaking tip.
I had to consider every possibility while I was safely on the ground, so that when the time came and I was actually making the moves without a rope, there was no room for doubt to creep in. Doubt is the precursor to fear, and I knew that I couldn't experience my perfect moment if I was afraid. I had to visualize and rehearse enough to remove all doubt. But beyond that, I also visualized how it would feel if it never seemed doable. What if, after so much work, I was afraid to try? What if I was wasting my time, and I would never feel comfortable in such an exposed position? There were no easy answers, but LCAP meant enough to me that I would put in the work and find out.
Okay, that was a really good section there where he was talking about that doubt is the precursor to fear. Like, what if I never even tried this? Like, I'd always kind of wonder, what if? I wonder if I could have made it. And again, great moment there for him to just kind of connect with the audience of just the realness of what he was getting ready to experience.
Some of my preparations were more mundane. This is a photo of my friend Conrad Anchor, climbing up the bottom of LCAP with an empty backpack. We spent the day climbing together to a specific crack in the middle of the wall that was choked with loose rocks. They made that section of climbing difficult and potentially dangerous because any misstep might knock a loose rock to the ground and kill a passing climber or hiker. So, we carefully removed the rocks, loaded them into the pack, and rappelled back down. Take a second to imagine how ridiculous it feels to climb 1,500 feet up a wall just to fill a backpack full of rocks.
That's great.
It's never that easy to carry a pack full of rocks around. It's even harder on the side of a cliff. It may have felt silly, but it still had to get done. I needed everything to feel perfect if I was ever going to climb the route without a rope. After 2 seasons of working specifically toward a potential free solo of LCAP, I finally finished all my preparations. I knew every handhold and foothold on the whole route, and I knew exactly what to do. Basically, I was ready. It was time to solo LCAP.
Cool kind of culminating moment there, right? Like, I'd done everything. I'd done all this prep work. We climbed up 1,500 feet. We cleaned out a bunch of rocks. We carried them back down. Finally, after a year of training, a year of prep, I was ready. Now, all of the audience, I don't know about you, I just feel like I'm on the edge of my seat. Like, yeah, I'm ready, even though like I didn't do this, but I feel like I'm a part of it, right? Which is a great example of what a speaker can do, is when an audience feels like they're so connected with the story that they feel like they're a part of the story, they feel like they're in the story. That's really, really good play. So he's got the audience right now.
On June 3rd, 2017, I woke up early, ate my usual breakfast of muesli and fruit, and made it to the base of the wall before sunrise. I felt confident as I looked up the wall, and felt even better as I started climbing. About 500 feet up, I reached a slab very similar to the one that had given me so much trouble on Half Dome. But this time was different. I scouted every option, including hundreds of feet of wall to either side, and I knew exactly what to do and how to do it. I had no doubts, I just climbed right through. Even the difficult and strenuous sections passed by with ease. I was perfectly executing my routine. I rested for a moment below the boulder problem, and then climbed it just as I had practiced so many times with the rope on. My foot shot across to the wall on the left without hesitation, and I knew that I'd done it.
Great picture. That's crazy.
Climbing Half Dome had been a big goal, and I did it, but I didn't get what I really wanted. I didn't achieve mastery. I was hesitant and afraid, and it wasn't the experience that I wanted. But LCAP was different. With 600 feet to go, I felt like the mountain was offering me a victory lap. I climbed with a smooth precision and enjoyed the sounds of the birds swooping around the cliff. It all felt like a celebration. And then I reached the summit after 3 hours and 56 minutes of glorious climbing. It was the climb that I wanted, and it felt like mastery. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, 2 things here that happen at the end. One is the kind of culmination there of I got to the top, and then I made it, and it felt like the best day of my life. And then he starts to immediately thank you, and I'm off stage, right? But again, 2 things that he could do. One is he could really sink into that moment a little bit more, really lean into that of, I got about 600 feet up and I felt like the mountain was offering me a victory lap. There were birds swooping around me, I could feel the air in my face. I finally made it to the top, and I knew that at that moment I had achieved mastery. Thank you. And so see if he just slows down, how it starts to feel a little bit more poignant, a little bit more, not necessarily heavy, but just like, ah, that's really powerful and effective. The other thing that he does here is that he doesn't give the audience a lot of opportunity to respond to him, right? He says thank you, and then he's gone, right? So anytime that you are finishing a presentation, say thank you, but then you can stay there in the moment, right? So if he just stays thank you, then it gives the audience a chance to respond. It gives the audience a chance to react versus him leaving stage too quickly. So you can see also how he says thank you, he starts to walk off, the audience starts to stand up, he's kind of turning around, and it's kind of caught in this moment of like, do I stay, do I go? So say thank you, give it a second there with the audience, and not like you're just standing there like, okay, I'm waiting for a standing ovation, but you're just acknowledging the audience as they're kind of acknowledging it. You're just being there present in the moment. That was great. That was a really, really great TED Talk from a guy who he probably doesn't do a lot of speaking. He's much more comfortable on the side of a mountain, but really, really great TED Talk, Alex. Well done. All right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that breakdown video of Alex Honnold's TED Talk, all about how he climbed to the top, he survived, and we're all very happy for that. Hey, if you like this breakdown video, you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like the video as well. And also, I'd like for you to do 2 types of comments. Number 1, let me know what is the takeaway that you're gonna pull from this breakdown video and apply to your next presentation. Let us know in the comments below. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to let me know if there's a TED Talk or a video or a presentation that you would like for us to break down to help you become a better speaker and presenter. All right? Again, drop that in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will catch you on the next video.